The HOA broke into my yard, trashed my pool, then sued me for their president's broken ankle. I came home to strangers partying in my backyard, wet towels, trash, even a banner claiming it was the HOA summer pool party. Their president slipped, got hurt, and blamed me for hosting a party I didn't even know about. She sued me for $30,000 until my security footage showed her breaking the gate and falling on a float. Now the case is dismissed, she's out as president, and my sign at the gate says it all: trespassers will be prosecuted. My name's Tom, and I've always been the kind of guy who enjoys a simple, steady routine. After 10 solid years of grinding away at my job, I finally bought myself a cozy 2-story place in the suburbs. Not too big, not too flashy, just something that felt like home. The real gem, though, was the backyard, a decent-sized patch of grass, and, more importantly, a crystal-clear pool that I took care of with my own 2 hands. That pool became my pride and joy. Every summer, I'd kick back out there with a cold drink and a good book, soaking up the quiet and calm. No screaming kids, no splash fights, no chaos, just me, the water, and the occasional hum of the filter. It was my personal little oasis, and I guarded it like gold. The neighborhood, overall, was fine. Clean, friendly enough, and quiet most of the time. Of course, every community has its quirks, and ours came with a homeowners association. At the heart of that HOA circus was a woman named Karen Simmons. She wasn't just the HOA president, she treated herself like the unofficial queen of the cul-de-sac. Karen was one of those people who kept a spreadsheet in her mind of which house left their Christmas lights up past New Year's and who hadn't trimmed their lawn exactly to regulation height. She'd shoot out passive-aggressive emails faster than Amazon Prime delivers, all while pretending it was for the good of the community. I kept my distance. I paid my dues on time, followed the basics, and didn't give her any reason to knock on my door. She was the kind of neighbor you nodded at from across the street but didn't stop to chat with unless you absolutely had to. That weekend, I had plans to head out of town. Nothing big, just a short 2-day trip to my brother's cabin upstate. I was looking forward to the break. Before leaving, I made sure everything was locked down. I double-checked the back gate, clicked on the security cameras, and even took one last walk around the yard to make sure the pool was covered and the lawn was in decent shape. Everything was in order. I had no reason to think twice. I locked the door, tossed my bag in the car, and drove off, ready to enjoy a peaceful couple of days with no interruptions, no responsibilities, and definitely no HOA nonsense. At least, that's what I thought. I got back that Sunday afternoon feeling recharged and relaxed, pulling into my neighborhood with the windows cracked and some easy tunes playing on the radio. But something felt off almost immediately. Even before I turned onto my street, I could hear it, a deep, thumping bass line shaking the air, mixed with high-pitched laughter and the kind of crowd chatter you usually only hear at festivals. I slowed down, frowning, assuming maybe someone a few houses down was throwing a wild birthday bash. But as I turned the corner and caught a glimpse of my own house, my heart dropped like a rock. Cars were lined up along both sides of the curb, haphazardly jammed in wherever there was space, and one of them was parked right across my driveway like they owned the place. I hit the brakes hard, just staring, trying to make sense of it. My lawn, my freshly cut, carefully edged lawn, was covered in muddy footprints from barefoot kids running wild. I saw wet towels thrown across the grass, folding chairs scattered around, and worst of all, a crowd of people, some lounging with drinks in hand, others splashing around inside my pool. Right across the gate, someone had the audacity to hang a banner. It read, "Homeowners Association Summer Pool Party. Welcome." My jaw clenched. I sat there for a second in complete disbelief, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me in reality. It felt like I was watching someone else's life, like I'd pulled into a movie set. This couldn't be real. This was my yard, my pool, my property, and it looked like some strangers had taken over. I slammed the car into park and stepped out, the door shutting behind me with a loud thunk. I marched toward the backyard, weaving through soaked kids and dodging a football that came flying out of nowhere, nearly smacking me in the face. My heart was pounding. My face was hot. And as I approached the back gate, the gate I always kept locked, I saw the latch dangling uselessly, the wood slightly splintered. It had been broken. "Excuse me," I barked, raising my voice over the music. Heads turned. A few people froze in place like guilty teenagers. The crowd started to part, and then I saw her. Karen Simmons, standing by the pool in a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses, sipping on what looked like a margarita. She was smiling like she'd just won a cruise vacation, completely at ease like she was the queen of some beach resort. "Karen," I yelled, storming toward her. "What the hell is going on here?" She turned slowly, pulling her sunglasses down just enough to peer at me. "Oh, Tom," she said, all breezy and fake sweet. "You're back early. I hope you don't mind. We decided to host the HOA pool party here this year. Everyone's having such a great time." I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Hosted here? This is my house. My pool. You can't just break into my backyard and throw a party." Karen gave this dismissive little wave, like I was some overdramatic child throwing a tantrum. Now, Tom, it's not as dramatic as you're making it out to be. Technically, the HOA has rights to community amenities. I blinked. Amenities? This isn't a damn park bench, Karen. This is private property. What you're doing is illegal. She sighed, totally unfazed. "Tom, you've always been such a responsible neighbor, always keeping your place so neat. I figured you'd be happy to share. It's just one afternoon. The community deserves to enjoy a pool in the summer, don't you think?" "No," I snapped. "What I think is you broke into my yard, trashed my lawn, and invited a bunch of people to trespass on my property without even asking. I want everyone out now." A wave of awkward murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people started collecting their things and slinking toward the exit, clearly embarrassed. Others just stood around, watching like they were waiting for popcorn. Karen, though, didn't flinch. She just tilted her head and said in that same syrupy tone, "Don't be so hostile, Tom. You weren't even using the pool this weekend. Honestly, you're overreacting." I could feel my fists clench. "I don't care if I wasn't using it. That doesn't give you the right to trespass. Did you even think to ask me?" Karen shrugged, like the question was beneath her. "I sent out an email last week. Didn't you get it? I mentioned the party would be happening nearby." "Nearby?" I repeated. "This is on my property, Karen." Before she could cook up another excuse, there was a loud shriek and a splash behind us. We both turned. A kid had climbed onto one of the pool floats and tipped it over, sending a big wave across the deck and sending Karen stumbling backward. She let out a yelp as she slipped and crashed hard onto the wet concrete, clutching her ankle. "Karen," someone shouted, rushing over. The music finally cut off. The party went dead silent. Karen sat up slowly, wincing and holding her foot. "I think I twisted something," she groaned through gritted teeth. A woman nearby pulled out her phone. "Should we call an ambulance?" I just stood there, still processing everything. I didn't throw this party. I didn't invite these people. And now Karen, the woman who orchestrated all of it, was hurt, right there in my backyard. Then she turned her head toward me, still grimacing. "Tom," she snapped, "you really need to do something about that pool deck. It's slippery. It's a safety hazard." I stared at her, speechless. "Are you serious right now? If you'd kept this place properly maintained," she hissed, "this wouldn't have happened." Before I could respond, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called an ambulance. A few minutes later, EMTs were wheeling Karen away on a stretcher, and she was still complaining, still blaming me, for what had just happened. As the ambulance pulled away, I stood there in stunned silence, looking out at the mess. Floats and trash in the pool, soaked towels on the grass, muddy footprints everywhere. My sanctuary looked like a war zone. And the woman who caused it all? She'd just left in an ambulance, already blaming me for every inch of it. The next morning hit me like a freight train. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring blankly at my backyard through the window. My once pristine pool looked like a crime scene. Bits of trash floated on the surface, plastic cups, a deflated float, even a lone flip-flop bobbing near the steps. The lawn was a total disaster. Muddy patches where grass used to be, footprints everywhere, broken pieces of the gate still lying in the dirt. It wasn't just the mess that got under my skin, it was the nerve. Karen had trespassed, thrown a full-blown party on my property without so much as a text, and then blamed me for slipping on a wet deck she had no business being near. Every time I replayed her smug face in my head, acting like I owed her something, it made my blood boil. I had just decided I'd head down to the police station after breakfast to file a formal complaint when the doorbell rang. I sighed, dragging myself out of my chair, figuring it was a neighbor coming to apologize, or worse, ask for their sunglasses from the bottom of my pool. I opened the door to find a guy in a cheap, wrinkled suit holding a thick envelope. He didn't even smile. "Thomas Willis?" "Yeah," I said warily. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." I blinked, staring at it like it was a prank. "Excuse me. You've been served," he repeated, like a vending machine spitting out the same canned response. Have a good day." Then he turned around and walked off like it was just another Tuesday. I stood there for a full 10 seconds, motionless, before I even looked at the envelope. The knot in my stomach started twisting before I'd even peeled the thing open. I sat back down, slowly tearing the top edge of the envelope, heart pounding. One glance at the bold print at the top of the first page nearly knocked the air out of me. Notice of lawsuit. And just like that, it got real. Karen Simmons was suing me. I read the first few paragraphs once, then again, slower this time, even though the words were already burned into my brain. According to the document, she was claiming that she'd been severely injured after slipping on a dangerously unsafe pool deck during what she called a community-sanctioned event. She wanted $30,000 to cover medical bills, emotional distress, and damages. I pushed back from the table, letting out a stunned laugh that sounded more like a cough. "This has to be a joke," I said out loud, though no one was around to hear me. The same woman who broke into my backyard, partied in my pool, ignored every rule of basic decency, and trespassed, by the way, was now painting herself as the victim. I paced the kitchen a few times, cursing under my breath, then pulled out my phone and called the only person who could help me keep my sanity, my lawyer, Mark Jensen. Mark was sharp, dry as toast, and not one for small talk. I'd worked with him once before on a contract issue, and he didn't mess around. "Mark, I've got a situation," I said the moment he picked up. I laid it all out. The trip, the broken gate, the party, the injury, the lawsuit. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Let me get this straight," he finally said. "She threw a party at your house without your permission, got hurt while trespassing, and now she's suing you?" "That's exactly what's happening," I said, my voice tight. Mark let out a sharp exhale. "Unbelievable. Look, you've got a solid case here, but HOA disputes can get complicated. We need to hit this hard and fast before it gains traction. Do you have any security footage?" A flicker of hope sparked. "Yeah, I've got cameras around the yard. They were on the whole time. The footage should show everything. Her and the others coming in, breaking the gate, and even the moment she fell." "Perfect," Mark said. "That's going to be key. I want you to send me everything, footage, any pictures of the damage, the police report if you filed one. The more we've got, the better. I'll start drafting a response to her claim." I hung up feeling a little steadier, but still walking around with that dizzy, surreal feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I started gathering everything I had. I watched the camera footage again, just to make sure, and sure enough, there was Karen, clear as day, pushing open the gate, waving people inside like she was hosting a wedding. Later in the clip, she could be seen holding a drink in one hand, waving dramatically with the other, then stepping backward onto a pool float that had somehow ended up on the deck. Her foot slipped, and down she went. There wasn't anything wrong with the deck. She just wasn't watching where she was going. I snapped photos of the broken latch, the muddy mess on the lawn, the trash in the pool. I filed the police report, attached everything I had, and sent it all to Mark that night. He said it was more than enough to build a strong defense. But even with the truth on my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a lawsuit. Karen wasn't just trying to get money. She was trying to ruin me. And if I didn't get ahead of it, I had a feeling this mess was only going to get worse. For the next few days, every time I stepped outside, I could feel the shift. It was like the air in the neighborhood had changed. Some neighbors gave me awkward smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Others avoided looking at me at all, suddenly very interested in their flower beds or phone screens. A few even muttered to each other when I walked by, and I could feel the weight of their whispers on my back. At first, I chalked it up to gossip, people just being nosy. But then the HOA sent out an email. The subject line was bland enough, community safety reminder. But the message inside, it might as well have been a smear campaign. "Dear HOA members," it read, "we regret to inform you that recent events have brought to light certain individuals who have failed to maintain safe and welcoming properties. This negligence has unfortunately led to incidents that do not reflect our shared values. The HOA is committed to ensuring a safe environment for all residents and will address any violations accordingly." It didn't say my name, but it didn't need to. The wording was pure Karen. Every sentence dripped with passive-aggressive blame, like I was some careless homeowner who'd turned my backyard into a danger zone for unsuspecting families. My blood boiled reading it. She was spinning the story fast, and the worst part was, people were starting to believe it. I wasn't just dealing with a lawsuit anymore. Karen was out there, twisting the truth, turning neighbors against me one barbecue and email thread at a time. I could either sit back and let her control the narrative, or I could push back. That's when Mark's words came back to me. We need to control the narrative, Tom. Get out ahead of it. Let people see the truth. I hated the idea of going door to door like some politician on a campaign trail, but I knew he was right. If I didn't speak up, Karen's version would be the only one they'd hear. I started with Greg, the quiet guy who lived 3 houses down. He was in his 60s, retired, and had always been decent to me. He'd even approached me after the ambulance left, clearly uncomfortable but honest. "Hey Tom," he said when I showed up at his doorstep with a folder under my arm. "I figured you might stop by." I told him the whole story, what Karen had done, the lawsuit, and how she was now claiming I invited her to use the pool. Greg shook his head slowly. "That's not what she told us," he said. "She said the HOA had worked out something with you, that it was approved." "It wasn't," I said, jaw tight. I had no idea any of it was happening until I got home. "I need help clearing that up. If you're willing to write a statement saying she misled everyone, it could really make a difference." Greg didn't hesitate. "I'll write it. She played all of us, Tom. It's time someone pushed back." Encouraged, I moved on, house by house. Some neighbors welcomed me in and listened, nodding along and agreeing to write statements once I showed them a screenshot or two from the security footage. Others looked like they wanted me off their porch the second I opened my mouth. A couple said they didn't want to get involved, which I respected sort of. But then there were the Martins. Mr. Martin was in his late 50s and always had an opinion about everything. When I knocked, he answered with a deep scowl, arms already crossed. "What do you want, Tom?" "Just a minute of your time," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's about the lawsuit Karen filed." "Yeah, I heard," he snorted. "Sounds to me like she wouldn't have fallen if you kept that deck in better shape." I swallowed hard. With all due respect, she wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't invite her, and she threw that party without telling me. "Still," he grunted, "maybe you should have kept your place a little safer." I pulled out my phone. "I've got security footage. You can see exactly what happened. She tripped on a pool float a kid left on the ground. The deck had nothing to do with it." He hesitated, then grumbled, "Fine. Let me see it." I played the clip, and he watched in silence. There was Karen, walking backward, drink in hand, stepping right onto the inflatable and going down hard. When it ended, he exhaled through his nose. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "She did that to herself?" "Exactly," I said. "I'm not asking anyone to lie, just to tell the truth." After a long pause, he gave me a slow nod. "All right, I'll talk to people." By the end of the week, I had 5 solid statements, including Greg's and Mr. Martin's. I had the police report, the broken gate photos, and, most importantly, the footage that showed Karen leading the charge into my yard like she was hosting a parade. Mark said we were in a strong position now. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to give up quietly, and something told me she had more tricks up her sleeve. As I stood on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees and my now empty pool shimmer in the fading light, I took a deep breath and braced myself. The truth was on my side, but in this neighborhood, sometimes the truth had to fight hard to be heard. The court date came faster than I expected, and even though I'd been preparing for weeks, I still woke up that morning with my stomach in knots. I put on my best suit, the one I hadn't touched since my cousin's wedding, and tried to convince myself that everything was under control. Mark kept reminding me we had the facts, the evidence, and the law on our side, but that didn't stop my nerves from firing on all cylinders. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about defending my name, my home, and the truth. I wasn't about to let Karen turn me into some villain in a story she made up to save face. The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd imagined. Plain walls, humming fluorescent lights, and a few wooden benches. Karen was already seated at the plaintiff's table when I walked in. Her ankle was wrapped in a brace, probably for dramatic effect, and her expression was pure theater, somber, wounded, dignified. Next to her sat her lawyer, a guy in a slick pinstriped suit who looked like he practiced smiling in the mirror just enough to seem charming but not too warm. I sat down next to Mark, who gave me a nod that said, "We've got this. Just keep your cool." The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair pulled back tight and glasses that gave off serious no-nonsense vibes. As she called the session to order, I straightened my posture and reminded myself to breathe. Karen's lawyer started things off, and man, he laid it on thick. "Your Honor," he began, voice dripping with mock sympathy, "my client, Ms. Karen Simmons, comes before you today seeking justice for the pain and trauma she suffered due to the defendant's clear negligence. What was supposed to be a joyful community event turned into a nightmare. He gestured toward Karen like she was a grieving widow at a funeral. Ms. Simmons was under the impression that Mr. Willis's pool was a shared community space, a reasonable misunderstanding, given his role in the HOA. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Mark had told me no interruptions, no reactions. Let the evidence speak. Then the lawyer pulled out a stack of medical records, complete with overly dramatic close-up photos of Karen's bruised ankle. She slipped, he continued, on a dangerously wet pool deck, resulting in significant injury and ongoing emotional distress. The bills are substantial, but the emotional toll? That's immeasurable. I glanced at Mark, who didn't even blink. He just started jotting notes, cool as ice. Karen took the stand next, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue like the memory of her fall was too painful to bear. I only wanted to bring the neighborhood together, she said softly. It was never about me. I thought Tom would be happy to let the community enjoy his pool. I didn't know I wasn't allowed. He'd always been so private, but I thought we were all part of something bigger. Her voice cracked right on cue, and her lawyer gave her an encouraging nod. And what happened that day, Miss Simmons? I slipped, she whispered. The deck was wet. I heard something snap in my ankle, and the pain was unbearable. I just remember thinking, how could this happen? I trusted that it was safe. I watched the judge carefully. She stayed neutral, but I could tell she was paying close attention. When Karen finally stepped down, it was our turn. Mark called me to the stand, and I walked up slow and steady, reminding myself of every word we'd rehearsed. Mr. Willis, Mark began, his voice calm and focused. Can you tell the court what you came home to that Sunday afternoon? I returned from a 2-day trip, I said, keeping my tone even, to find a full party happening in my backyard. Dozens of people. Music. My pool was full. The gate had been broken. I didn't give permission for anyone to be there. Did you invite Miss Simmons or any member of the HOA to use your property for an event? Absolutely not, I said firmly. I had no knowledge of any party until I saw it with my own eyes. Mark nodded. Let's talk about your security system. You have cameras around the property? Yes. Multiple. They were on the entire weekend. And what did they record that day? I turned toward the judge. The footage shows Ms. Simmons forcing open the gate and leading people into my backyard. Later, it shows her stepping backward onto a pool float, not the deck, and falling. The surface wasn't the issue. It was the float. Mark gave the signal, and the bailiff played the footage. The room fell completely silent. Every second was crystal clear. Karen at the gate, breaking the latch, ushering neighbors inside like she was leading a tour. Then the fall. Her drink in one hand, waving with the other, stepping back onto a bright green float left near the pool's edge, and boom, down she went. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. She shifted in her seat, her confident expression cracking as she avoided the judge's eyes. Mark turned back to me. Do you believe your property was unsafe in any way that day? No, I've always kept it clean and maintained. She wasn't supposed to be there. What happened was her own doing. Mark wrapped it up, resting our case. Karen's lawyer tried to recover, throwing out some nonsense about how I should have had signs posted or extra security, but the damage was done. The footage, the police report, the witness statements, all of it painted a clear picture. Karen wasn't a victim. She was a trespasser who had gotten hurt because of her own recklessness. The judge called for a brief recess. When she returned, her ruling came fast and sharp. The evidence is clear, she said, voice firm and final. Ms. Simmons entered Mr. Willis's property without permission. Under premises liability law, the defendant owes no duty of care to trespassers, and the injury in question was a result of Ms. Simmons's own actions. This case is dismissed with prejudice. She paused. Furthermore, Ms. Simmons is ordered to reimburse Mr. Willis for legal fees and any damages to his property. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Karen looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. Her lawyer packed up his things in silence. A few neighbors approached me outside the courtroom, offering quiet apologies and awkward handshakes. We didn't know, Greg said. Karen made it sound like you were the bad guy. I nodded, too tired to be mad anymore. It's okay. I just hope that's the end of it. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like the tide had finally turned. About a week after the court ruling, word started spreading around the neighborhood like wildfire. Karen had officially stepped down as HOA president. No press release, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet little email sent out in the middle of the night, announcing her decision to focus on personal matters. And just like that, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac vanished from her throne. The reactions were mixed. Some folks pretended like they hadn't been defending her the whole time, while others, like Greg, stopped by just to say, "Good riddance." Whatever their stance, it was clear the entire vibe of the block had shifted. People were no longer whispering when I walked by. A few even waved. Apologies trickled in, awkward but sincere. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. That weekend, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The pool still needed attention. Leaves and debris had settled into the corners, and the water had lost a bit of its usual sparkle. I scrubbed every inch, vacuumed the bottom, balanced the chemicals, and refilled the missing water until it looked like something out of a resort brochure again. The lawn had been trampled beyond recognition in places, so I reseeded the worst spots, patched up the sprinklers, and cleaned up the broken gate. It took me the whole weekend, but by Sunday evening, everything looked like it used to, or maybe even a little better. For the first time in weeks, my backyard felt like mine again. I sat out there with a cold drink in hand, letting the warm breeze roll over me. The sun dipped low, casting a golden reflection across the pool's surface. The only sounds were birds and the occasional rustle of leaves, not a single scream, splash, or bass thump to be heard. I didn't realize how much noise had crept into my life until it was gone. That kind of silence? It hits different when you've had to fight to get it back. Before heading inside, I grabbed a wooden post and a metal sign I had ordered the day after the hearing. I carried them over to the front gate, drove the post deep into the ground, and screwed the sign in place with slow, deliberate turns. When I stepped back to look at it, I couldn't help but smile. The message was simple, bold, and impossible to misread. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement. And this time, I meant every word. As I walked back across the yard, the grass soft under my feet and the pool shimmering beside me, a calm settled over me I hadn't felt in a long time. The drama, the lawsuit, the whispers, it was all behind me now. Karen had tried to rewrite reality, to flip the story and make me the villain, but the truth held its ground. And now, with my space restored and the neighborhood finally quiet again, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, like myself. Peace had returned, one chlorine-scented breeze at a time.